Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Maria Nefeli Sarafoglu, journalist for Antenna Television, and I will be moderating this discussion for the International Conference on Greek and Turkish Relations. So moving along to our second panel, we're going to discuss visions and means to manage the political incompatibilities of Turkey and Greece. A week after the meeting in New York between the Greek Prime Minister and the Turkish President, it seems that both countries want bilateral relations to improve, and both leaders agreed to a tight schedule. And we're going to witness more frequent meetings between Greek and Turkish officials on a wider range of subjects. However, at some point, we'll have to touch on the most controversial issues, such as maritime jurisdiction, territorial waters, and the continental shelf. So the purpose of this panel is to find out if we have a new window of opportunity to reach common ground. And our esteemed speakers, well experienced, will make their point of view and will propose ways, the most effective ways to ease political disputes. So let's do the introduction. We have Professor Chari Arhan, professor at Altinbas University. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening for everyone.
We have Konstantinos Philis, associate professor at the American College of Greece and director of the Institute of Global Affairs. We have Petros Liakouras, professor of international relations at the University of Piraeus, and Murat Aslan, associate professor.
Thank you, Maria.
Welcome. Of international politics at Hasan Kuluncu University and a researcher of setup. So as I was saying, the purpose of this panel is to find out if we can reach common ground nowadays. So I'm going to begin with Professor Philis. So is it possible to reach common ground nowadays? I mean, how important is the role of political elites in shaping public opinion? I mean, we need a new narrative, and which is the best way to change negative perceptions?
Thank you. I hope that you can hear me. I can hear you well. So thanks for the invitation. Actually, we are co-organizing this event with Murat, and of course under the coordination of Ms. Anafoglu as well. So thanks for that. Well, you put lots of questions, and which are, of course, not only topical but also challenging, as challenging are Greek-Turkish relations, and they can, of course, be characterized, if we want to be frank, as problematic as well. So it's even more challenging given that we are neighbors. We share some common fronts, but at the same time, we have some issues that divide us, which are traditional, historic, and not easy to tackle. At least this is what practice has shown us. So there are tensions between the two sides. We have mutual accusations of who bears responsibility for both the persistence of high tensions and the inability or unwillingness to settle bilateral disputes. There is a serious disagreement as to what ultimately constitutes a dispute between Athens and Ankara, with Greece arguing that there is only one dispute related to the delimitation of maritime zones, especially the exclusive economic zone and continental shelf, while Turkey, as we know, claims that there are more issues based on claims that it has put on the table, including the existence of gray zones in the Aegean or the demilitarization of the islands of the northern and eastern Aegean, which Turkey links to their sovereignty. I won't get into details. We can discuss about this issue during the Q&A session. I would like to focus on Maria's first question regarding the political elites and how public discourse is shaped. And if you follow the debate in the two countries, you will find that some of the problems seem intractable, although this is precisely the role of diplomacy, to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. However, another thing we see is that politicians are responsible to a big extent for the toxicity of the climate, often investing in nationalistic rhetoric. And there are others with a voice in public discourse, like academics, but journalists as well, who play to the crowd. So we have found ourselves in a vicious circle, in a spiral of negativity, stereotypical perceptions, prejudice, while in the absence of a prospect of solution, the belief is being consolidated that on the one hand, dialogue and negotiations are a waste of effort, and on the other, that gains for one side automatically mean losses for the other. In other words, a clear zero-sum game. Therefore, in such an environment, one wonders whether there is room for promoting a positive agenda, which has been your second or third question, if I recall well. The truth is that the leaderships must show political courage in order to be able to reverse the current climate, although, as was clear from the recent earthquakes in Turkey and the solidarity shown by the Greek people and the welcoming of this solidarity by the Turkish people, I am not sure that it is societies that ultimately impose an agenda of intolerance and unwillingness to compromise. It is more the political elites who, as I said, either play the nationalist card when it is expedient to do so or misread popular opinion. And they are afraid of the political cost they might incur if they speak frankly. But the elite themselves have created this situation by disseminating maximalist aspirations that they ought to know are far from realistic. And there are some recent statistics I was just reading a poll, if I may, which was conducted very recently, and it tells us that regarding improvement, 48% of Greeks and 43% of Turks think and feel that there is an improvement in bilateral ties since the catastrophic earthquakes in Turkey, which is true. So half Greeks and half Turks have this impression. What is, though, very intriguing, to say the least, is that as far as military incident is concerned, I read here that 55% of Greeks and 25% of Turks think that it is possible. So more than half of the Greeks and 1/4 of Turks think that the military incident is possible, although we know that, of course, nothing is impossible, especially in today's world, but this possibility is very far, I would say, from being one way or the other materialized. And as it was mentioned in the previous panel, whenever the two sides got really close to a conflict, they both realized the dire consequences of such a possibility, and they decided to de-escalate. So it is, for me, problematic that more than half of my compatriots feel that a military incident is possible with Turkey. Of course, we also know that for us, Turkey is a #1 priority and is not only a challenge or a competitor, it is considered as a threat. Whereas in the case of Turkey, Greece is not and will not be its #1 priority, and can barely be regarded as a threat. Before I conclude, if I may, do I have 2 more minutes?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. So there is recently a discussion about whether we are about to go to Hague or to any kind of settlement, and I must admit that it's way too soon to be talking about the Hague or any other settlement through legal means. There are a number of complicated steps that have to be completed first. Especially taking the matter to the Hague requires the signing of a joint agreement to refer the dispute to the Hague, which means an agreement on the dispute to be considered by the court and the methodology. So I think we're still a long way off. At the current stage, what would be valuable is to restore at least a little trust, because the distrust is mutual and very strong. We also need to reestablish and maintain the channels of communication so we can avoid hostile, inflammatory statements and inflammatory rhetoric and actions on the ground, and keep the moratorium alive. As you know, the political consultations will begin in mid-October. During these consultations, it will become clear whether there is room for an agreement, not whether we can bridge our vast differences on various issues, but in terms of how we can go about settling these disputes. And to get to the point of the positive agenda, there are obviously many common challenges in today's world, especially on the regional level, that cooperation is imperative. If each individual country responds on its own to problems that reach beyond its borders, failure is virtually guaranteed. On the other hand, if there is shared will and joint effort, say on the climate crisis, on natural disasters, even on migration flows, which are a bone of contention between Greece and Turkey, whereas in reality their interests have more in common than those of each side with the European Union. So, moreover, on low policy issues such as trade, economy, tourism, innovation, there is also a great deal that can be achieved, as shown by the very good work carried out by the two foreign ministries in recent years, actually deputy foreign ministers, which bore fruit. So, as in life, in diplomacy, there are no one-way streets or dead ends. What we need is trust and confidence, trust for each other, even though disagreements will remain, and confidence on our capabilities and other partners' intentions. And for example, here, and I am going to conclude, Greece is not concerned if Turkey and Israel or Turkey and Egypt restore ties. On the contrary, given our strong ties both with Israel and Egypt, we hope that this might even have a positive impact on how Turkey approaches regional developments and its role. I'm going to end here. Thank you.
So we can pave the way to reach a solution at some point and collaborate through all the sectors that you mentioned. I'm going to ask Professor Erhan now. So there's plenty of room for collaboration between the two countries. And as Professor Philis mentioned, we've seen humanitarian diplomacy, we've seen support during natural disasters. In your opinion, which are the most suitable areas to ink an agreement and ensure a coordinated response? For example, can Greece and Turkey agree on a migration pact? Today, the Turkish Interior Minister said that there's great collaboration with the Greek Migration Minister towards that direction.
Yes, hello from St. Petersburg. Sorry for the problems in the internet because low charge in my room. Anyway, if I go back to 4 decades, almost starting from the 1980s, late 1980s, every 10 years, we opened a new page with Greece. This is one of them. Recently, we opened a new blank page, or we have more enthusiastic to solve our problems with Greece. I think there are no real sincere enthusiasm from both sides to come together and focus upon the real problems between two parties, like the sovereignty problems, territorial waters, continental shelf, etc. And in my opinion, it is very tough, very mission impossible thing to find a solution. The only thing we do every 10 years is to freeze, is to stop it, deepen, and create some sort of confrontation in the region. We try to open ways for cooperation in softer areas. So we can find tens of examples of this kind in last 4 decades between Mitsotakis and Özal, Turgut Özal, between Papandreou and Cem, between Gül and Simitis, Davutoğlu and Papandreou, and this is another round of optimistic era. Within 2-3 years, we will see we will lose our optimism and we will start another pessimistic era. this is a circular, unfortunately, maybe fate of Turkish-Greek relations since the last 4 decades.
Can we change that?
Because we have very low motivation in both sides to come together and solve the problems. For Turkish side, the main motivation was the European Union membership in late 1980s and throughout 1990s. But now we in Turkey, among many Turkish citizens, see that in Brussels there is no willing for Turkish membership. So membership to EU has lost its place as a motive behind Turkish minds to come together with the Greeks to solve some problems. So any promise from Athens about opening the way for visa removal, for instance, it doesn't make any sense in Ankara anymore, because it is not Greece which blocks Turkish way to Brussels. It is other countries. Secondly, in the Greek side, the main motivation previously was the economic issue, particularly in early 1990s when Greece decided to enter the Eurozone. Of course, our neighbor wanted to reduce its military expenditure, and they forced to open a detente era with Turkey. And Turkey was that time was willing to be a candidate country for EU, and Turkish politicians also supported this period. But then what happened? Nothing. It did not result with Turkish membership. You know, since 2004, we opened only half of negotiation chapters with the EU, and 8 of them are blocked because of the Cyprus issue. 4 more is blocked by France, etc., etc. So EU has lost its being as a motivation behind Turkish-Greek relations. So, as someone, as a diplomatic historian who witnessed this 4 decades and actively played a role, at least the 2 previous white page eras to foster the relations, depending on my individual experience, I say it is not. We can find some areas of cooperation, and we should focus on them other than the sovereignty issues. Therefore, I would like to underline and I would like to propose some sort of cooperation areas which can be really realized, and we can go forward very smoothly. The first one is, of course, this fighting against natural disasters and environmental disasters. I sometimes do not understand why both parties, both statesmen from both countries, come together and create a concrete, real means for fighting against forest fires, for instance. Because every year, both in Greek islands in the Aegean and mainland in Greece and in Turkey, we have huge wildfires and forest fires, which results burning of thousands of acres of forest, etc. And we can join our efforts to fight against them. And it can be a clear example for furtherance of cooperation against natural disasters if we can establish a firm and permanent joint force against forest fires, then we can enlarge the scope of this cooperation to other means of natural disasters, for instance, sea pollution or preserving the sea life. Why not to cooperate together against saving the lives of Mediterranean seals, for instance? So these kind of things, soft things, can also create a support among the people. And if the support among the people for the furtherance of Turkish-Greek relations increases, then the politicians can maybe in the future, not near future, but in midterm, can take step forward to talk about real tough issues. So we should start from the easiest one. And another area of cooperation is in the field of education. As a university professor and as a Jean Monnet chair, I, for several times, proposed my colleagues in Greece and in Turkey to start a joint diploma program with a Greek university, for instance. We have joint diploma programs with German universities, with French universities, with British universities, but not with Greece. So every time I heard a lot of pretexts from Greek side. Okay, our universities are so independent and they cannot take directives from governments, so they have to decide. Okay, let them decide individually, and we will decide individually. Why not to create a joint full scholarship program, for instance, in master's or graduate level? Both students from Greece and Turkey come together and take joint courses from Greek and Turkish university professors and have a joint degree. Because it is possible, it is going on with American universities. My university has 2 joint programs, one with German university, one with American university. So why not to do this with Greek universities, between Greek and Turkish universities? So this is not a tough job. We can go forward. I'm not talking about writing a joint history book. It is mission impossible, I know. French and Germans wrote a joint history book in 50 years. It took 50 years for writing a joint history book.
So
maybe we can. Sorry?
So to sum up your...
I am proposing to, we should not lose time talking about these sovereignty issues. I am very sincere. I am very frank. I listened to many scholars and politicians for 40 years. You know, I have read and I have been sometimes a part of this kind of political negotiations, goes up to nowhere, because at the end, it's a sovereignty issue. We are not talking about the same thing. Some talking about territorial waters, some talking about continental shelf. We do not use the same terminology. So if we want to cooperate, we should take a way of neo-functionalism, which means we start to cooperate where it is possible. We start to cooperate in trade, in tourism, in education, in humanitarian issues, fighting against illegal trafficking of humans, fighting against forest fires. If we result positively, and this will create a real support among the peoples in both of Aegean, then politicians maybe go forward for the other issues. Otherwise, it will take 4 more, 5 more new ages of blank pages in the next half century. We will result nothing in the Aegean.
Well, you described a long process in establishing and building a collaboration in many sectors that will help politicians change their narrative and in order to improve their relations. So I'm going to Professor Liakouras now. So as we heard, Professor Liakouras, is it all a matter of process? Could you help us explore the best, I would say, political and institutional methods in resolving disputes in a peaceful way?
Thank you very much, Maria. First of all, I have to go through the terminology of a dispute in order to understand what are the disputes between Greece and Turkey, because every time one part invokes a dispute, the other part has to accept it and, of course, think about it and find out what is the best way of solving the problem or settling the difference that exists. Let me tell you that according to international law and practice, on terminology, a disputed disagreement on the point of factor law, a conflict of legal views or of interests between parties. Disputes may arise from different interpretation of legal provision or international law, or from contesting legal right, or invoking a conflicting claim. Between Greece and Turkey, disputes are classified, according to my writings, according to applicable law, which is for settlement in each case. Firstly, the delimitation of continental self-exclusive economic zone, the breadth of the territorial waters and the national airspace are all legal disputes that can be addressed or invoked bilaterally and be resolved according to principles and rules of international law of the sea. While the gray zones theory, the one that contests in sovereignty of islets or other islands, has a complex legal framework, including not only the basic source of Lausanne Peace Treaty, but also the law of treaties and the contemporary notion of sovereignty. While the restrictions on of fortification, I'm talking about the partial demilitarization that exists, and of fortification and military personnel as provisional measures, is being superseded by post-war international law concerning self-defense, countermeasures, and national security. The limitation of continental self-exclusive economic zone is a bilateral issue, one that deserves really settlement of high priority through negotiations. Otherwise, exclusive sovereign rights cannot be enjoyed by either state. Strategically, it has to be accelerated for even one reason, as the needed renewable energy sources are exploited or can be exploited also from wind turbines, and these are constructed in a delimited by agreement or judicial decision exclusive economic zone. This is very important. Actually, it is an outstanding legal dispute which is created by overlapping claims of undelimited areas of continental self-exclusive economic zone of Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean, over which, in the absence of agreement or judicial decision, both states have only entitlements, which is an expectation of having a right at some point. According to the law of the sea, exclusive sovereign rights of research and exploitation with regard to continental shelves and exclusive economic zone natural resources are exercised in the area that appertains to each state after delimitation is agreed or has been agreed. If the limitation agreement is not possible, of course there is way out. States can consensually resort to judicial adjudication, going to the court. This is according to the law of the sea, binding on both countries, so we have to follow it. On the other hand, the breadth of the territorial sea, because this is also something of a dispute from part of Turkey, we can say few things. The corresponding of national airspace, which is also a matter of dispute from Turkey. They are zones of sovereignty and are enacted and probably can be settled unilaterally by national legislation. With regard to territorial sea, every coastal state enjoys sovereignty and deserves the right to establish unilaterally the zone as well as the limit, which cannot exceed 12 nautical miles. Let me say that there is way out also to that. The relevant provisions of the law of the sea leaves discretion to the state to define the outer limit. There is no obligation actually to extend it to 12 nautical miles, meaning that the coastal state can opt for a variegated extension, different limit to different coasts. So the state has to make the critical decision. The choice is between delimiting a continental self-exclusive economic zone, which is the high stake for the bilateral agreement and the bilateral relation also, versus extension of territorial sea to maximum possible, which is in some way a hardship for the delimitation of the continental self-exclusive economic zone. In other words, to choose either territorial waters of lesser extent, which is a high stake domestically, there is a political cost for that, but in return of a wider high seas areas, the seabed of which is continental shelf, and the water column possible exclusive economic zone. This is the dilemma. But in any case, I underline this, it is not a matter of bilateral agreement. The rest of disputes cannot become subject of negotiation, and I can explain this in more words in the Q&A, not to say, because they concern allegations of Turkey with regard to interpretation of the 1923 Lausanne Peace Treaty, 100 years ago. But now we have also a contemporary international law that covers all of these matters with the notions that are very important, and they very necessary, and of course they give answers to questions like this. Since 1975, when negotiations on continental self-delimitation were initiated, Greece has opted for a peaceful settlement of dispute, and this is the only way in order to get out of this impasse. The main goal of Greece has been to settle the continental self-delimitation by recourse to the ICJ. That does not mean that we don't go to negotiation and, of course, settle other minor, like the territorial waters or whatever else of these disputes. The other issues concerning the extension of territories and the width of the international airspace are seen as in the domain of sovereignty and a matter of unilateral legislation, as I said before. However, any kind of determination of territorial sea breadth has to be final before entering the jungle of negotiations concerning continental self and exclusive economic zone delimitation, which may imply also the adjustment of national airspace. You can see with one move, we can, of course, have 2, 3 disputes settled. And also interests of either side or of the international community concerning international navigation through high seas also has to be taken into consideration. From 1975, almost 50 years now, until the present day, these Aegean disputes remain unresolved, and with confrontation having expanded to the Eastern Mediterranean Sea recently, an area which, according to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea provisions and the courts and other tribunals jurisprudence, Turkey and Greece should enter into substantive negotiations, and this is the real answer to our questions. Substantive negotiations to delimit their continental selves and an exclusive economic zone. So Articles 74 and 83 of UNCLOS concerning exclusive economic zone and continental self respectively provide for delimitation by agreement in geographical circumstances of overlapping claims between opposite or adjacent coastal states in order to reach an equitable result. From the above mentioned disputes, the delimitation of continental self is crucial. The relevant provisions of UNCLOS, to which all refer as binding, reflecting customary international law, say nothing about methodology of how to achieve an equitable result. But it has been up to the international tribunals to certify what the law is, and the law is judge-made by virtue of its jurisprudence. Neither state can proceed to delimit unilaterally something that it is not permitted. So delimitation based on the courts and other tribunals' jurisprudence by way of agreement or judicial award is the only way of confirming sovereign rights in delimited continental self and exclusive economic zone areas. In order to do that, first and foremost, negotiation in good faith is the binding step for both states concluding delimitation agreement or special agreement to refer the dispute to international court, tribunals, or arbitration for settlement. Of course, negotiation for both Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean. Of course, before we engage in negotiation, we have to go through this phase of pre-negotiation, some sort of political dialogue today, but in previous years, the exploratory talks. And of course, in the course of settlement, each state should refrain from any unilateral act that may harden the peaceful settlement. This is made possible. Can be made possible actually if moratorium can be extended beyond December or beyond any time until the route is or the roadmap, of course, justifies this. And of course,
sum up your thinking, Professor.
Yes, and I don't say anything more than that. So anything else to go to the Q&A session? Thank you.
Thank you. So Professor Aslan, Greece and Turkey confirmed the will to maintain a good atmosphere in bilateral relations. So since we're discussing about the most effective ways to reach common ground, which ones are the best, in your opinion, to resolve any disputes in a peaceful way between Greece and Turkey?
Thanks, Maria. First of all, I thank you for cooperating. And also I thank Professor Phyllis for his support in organizing this event. It was really valuable. And this event is really timely because both countries will start a refreshed negotiations. At least will start a trust building process, as was agreed in New York through the meetings of the President Erdogan and also Prime Minister Mitsotakis. On the other hand, for me, I believe both countries, at least leaderships or decision makers, should ask one critical question. This is, what do they want at the end of the overall processes? If it's about having the problems diminish from the agendas of both countries, it's one thing. If it's about maximizing exactly the profits, it's another thing. So this question is really critical. On the other hand, there's one fact. Sometimes you are not the one driving the overall process, but you are a subject of the developments surrounding you. For instance, global developments like natural disasters, like the wars which popped up nowadays in the form of either conventional or unconventional form, well, it's something. If it's about regional developments, you can go to Eastern Mediterranean Sea, Black Sea, or the Balkans, etc. Well, it's another thing, and these are the inputs for the, directly affecting the relations of both countries. Well, bilaterally, Professor Likouras explained that much well. Bilateral relations are manifold. On the other hand, there is one fact, as previously delineated during the first panel. Well, these are intertwined to each other. So you can't isolate one single problem, but you have to have a comprehensive approach addressing the overall problems in the meantime. This is another fact of the problem. Well, and also there's another thing, and especially for the Greek side, it's really important. It's the internal dynamics. Why? Because there is a great prejudice in the minds of the public because there are narratives circulated a lot, especially in the newspapers, like the threat comes from the East. This is the sentiment. And you have to manage exactly the overall process per the perceptions of the public, especially period to the elections. Then, if the picture is that much complicated, are we ready, or do both countries are ready to resolve the problems, especially to achieve commonly agreed shared goals? This is the question. If yes, if the response is yes, I believe, my suggestion would be to identify a common vision and, delineate a common intention directly framed by the political leaderships of both countries. I believe that it's lacking right now. There's no common vision for both. Second thing, it's in my PhD dissertation and also in my book published in the UK. There is a continuity of belief, attitude, behavior, and also added by group norms and values that I call behavioral cascade. Well, if you apply this formula to Turkish and Greek relations, belief, attitude, and behavior are always uploaded by negative connotations. So group norms and values, which are much more permanent, well, they're over there, not changing that much. On the other hand, usually denying the probable resolutions. So in my opinion, first of all, both countries should start how to mend behavior, attitude, and belief to generate much more positive norms and values. And that's missing. Today, I read a sentence circulated by a Turkish-Greek professor. It was about values and ethics. So we have to build, as both countries start thinking about what values we could share. If not, if there's no value, that means these problems will not resolve. Second thing, the language is important, I believe, narratives exactly. So if we circulate and repeat the same things, same sentences continuously, there will be no change in the public perception, in the public attitude or behavior. And in my opinion, it's the essence. As Professor Erhan underlined, I had prepared the same stuff actually. The problem currently is about the public perception in each country. Think that there is a limited public-to-public interaction other than the Turkish tourists visiting the Aegean Islands. In this sense, I believe there must be, as Professor Erhan delineated, a neo-factionalist application of politics. We should start with the most available, easiest issues that both countries can cooperate. For instance, business and tourism is one branch for this. We had discussed this a lot with Professor Phyllis. Then not the hardships, but easygoing issues must be at the top of the agenda. If you start discussing, for instance, international law, well, believe in me, there are a lot of ways that you can easily surpass the norms. On the other hand, there is one thing we usually confuse international law with national law. National law binds all the citizens or non-residents as far as this individual is inside the country. But international law is binding if the other country is a party to the treaty or agreement or regulation, international arrangement, let me say. And Turkey is not a party to the law of sea. Then, well, we will continue to discuss it if it's applicable or not. So I think we should discuss first with the easy ones. Second thing, there's a great term in Latin, rebus sic stantibus. Well, the conditions changed. I don't believe that. If there is a great sensitivity in the relations of both Greeks and Turkey, well, there are great agreements signed, inked by the leaderships of both countries. If there's a dispute right now, we have to go back and exactly check what both countries inked and see what has changed. Then we can go forward more easily. If you tell me, well, it's about having a court decision to resolve the problems, well, it's not that much easier. Why? Both countries must prepare a folder to present it to the Court of Justice. And believe in me, it will never happen because both countries will not agree on anything in this. For instance, what sort of reference both will agree just to have the attention of the court? I don't think that it's not that much easy. Then we have to go back and check what is signed in 1923 between two countries and what is the difference between the agreed and currently applied. This is one issue. Second thing, rationality is always the one that will drive the overall process. Smart decisions and wise actions are important. Then trust-building efforts are really important right now. On the other hand, I was an officer in 2006, and there were still discussions on trust-building efforts. As a delegation, we visited Athens as members of the Turkish army, and still we are there. I mean, no developments right now. Well, I want to stop here, Maria, because I don't want to exceed my time limit. And waiting the other question, by that way, I can add some additional comments. Thank you.
Yes, well, before we go to the Q&A part, I'm just waiting to see any comments or any questions from the audience. Haven't had any feedback yet, so you're going to help me with that. Let's start with Professor Phyllis again, and let's talk about the European angle. I mean, where do we stand on Turkey's EU membership bid? Accession talks are practically frozen. So can Greece help in the resumption of accession talks, or is there any alternative?
Currently, we are in front of the perfect stalemate, the perfect gridlock, in the sense that there is no, or at least up until very recently, there was no appetite either on behalf of the EU or on behalf of Turkey for the resumption of accession talks. And if we want to be frank, and we have to be frank, as we speak, there is no question. I mean, the EU is having second thoughts and is very skeptical. I mean, mainly France, but even Germany, in accepting some Western Balkan states, which are much closer than Turkey. And Turkey, of course, feels as the eternal mistress of the European Union, because these talks have been going on for quite some time, actually more than a couple of decades. If we were back in 1999, when we had the Helsinki process that was initiated by Greece, we could, of course, I mean, Turkey really believed at its European prospect. In 2002, AKP was elected. President Erdogan was considered by many Europeans as a modest Muslim leader who can even develop into a paradigm for other Muslim countries. We are far from there. Unfortunately, we had some developments in Cyprus. In 2004, we had an agreement between Greece and Turkey, and we reached. I mean, if I recall well, it was in late 2003. Petros Liakouras knows more about this subject, that we reached, or we got really close to ink an agreement between the two sides for a number of reasons, internal, but not only. This momentum was lost, and now 20 years after, again, I can only see EU-Turkey relations being built or restored, not on the basis of values, on the basis of possible accession, but they seem to be very transactional. And that is very problematic for me. In what sense? And I'm going to conclude. In the sense that if, for instance, Germany or France or Italy or Spain or other states that have business interests, economic interests, they have an exposure in Turkey's banking sector like Spain, are interested only in promoting their national interest through the European path vis-a-vis Turkey, that is not enough. And of course, on the Turkey side, if Turkey now that has this sense of a great or a potentially great power, even in global terms, not to mention regional terms, has this, this chance, this opportunity, not to follow or to respect a specific framework in its relations with the European Union, but to do it on a transactional basis that will serve a very specific interest, that is highly problematic, particularly for Greece and for Cyprus, for obvious reasons. What we want is to set a framework, some rules and values and norms, as Murat said before, that will be commonly accepted. And in that respect, what I feel is that although Greece does not have the diplomatic clout to impose its will on other European partners, as was mentioned before, what I can say is that Greece and Cyprus can facilitate this new attempt to restore ties between Turkey and the EU that have been damaged. And let me share, Petros happened to be with me. We visited Mr. Christodoulidis, the president of Cyprus, and we had the discussion with him, as we had with Mr. Tatar, the leader of the Turkish Cypriot community. And Mr. Christodoulidis told us that if there is an improvement in talks for the Cyprus issue, he is ready, he is prepared to lift some traditional policies on behalf of Cyprus vis-à-vis Turkey, as far as EU-Turkey relations are concerned. And he sent a positive message to our Turkish colleagues as well. Again, Petros was there, and he might add up to my comment that provided that there is some improvement in talks in Cyprus, I don't see that happening, very unfortunately, but provided that there is some improvement, Nicosia is ready to change its policies, even regarding some frozen chapters in EU-Turkey accession talks. But it's not only that. I think that Greece has demonstrated its will to facilitate dialogue between EU and Turkey. And if, for instance, we have in the near future a modernization, an update, let me put it this way, of the joint declaration of March 2016 on migration between Turkey and the EU, with the support of Greece, with the assistance of Greece, I think that this can be a first step in very practical terms that will showcase the new approach that Greece has, not only vis-à-vis Turkey, but on EU-Turkish relations. By the way, Greece and Cyprus can only benefit as long as Turkey gets closer in terms of norms, again, values, or at least a set of framework gets closer to the EU.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Professor Philis. So, Professor Erhan, under the current circumstances, what makes the difference in the efforts to build confidence between Greece and Turkey? And do you find that both leaders have the same will to go on and ink agreements in the non-controversial issues, like you mentioned before, in the areas of trade, investments, and other areas, as you mentioned?
Yes, as I mentioned in the first round, I think it is not possible to find solutions to tough subjects in bilateral relations. For instance, Cyprus issue. Even speaking in this sincere, frankly panel, we don't share the same history. It was not the loss of momentum 20 years ago. It was because the Southern Cypriots rejected the Kofi Annan's plan. It is a reality. Even among the academics, when speaking about the facts which had happened under our witnessness, we changed it. I mean, it was because Southern Cypriots rejected an agreement which was already reached between the two parties. It was Kofi Annan's plan. That's why we don't have a solution for 2 decades after Kofi Annan's plan. But what happened? Cyprus Republic became an EU member without an agreement with the North. How can you put all the blame to the Turks in the North, who approved Kofi Annan's plan? It was not the Turks, it was the Greek Cypriots rejected the plan. That's why it is very difficult issue to solve this kind of sovereignty problems. That's why I would like once more underline the importance of soft issues, cooperation between universities, cooperation between rescue and research teams, cooperation against environmental disasters can be areas to start something between at least the two countries. If we come back to the European Union accession process, in fact, after 19 years of negotiations, Turkey and EU has changed a lot. I mean, when we look at Brussels, it is not the Brussels 20 years ago, and Turkey is not the same as it was 20 years ago. And unfortunately, as someone who was a supporter of the EU course of Turkey 20 years ago, it is sorry for me to say that the scope of the relations almost reduced into only 2 items. For European side, Turkey is seen as a bloc to stop immigrants to Europe. So everything is focused on the using Turkey as an apparatus to block the immigrants. And for Turkey, the relations with EU is reduced to the trade relations only. However, it was a huge area of cooperation extending from Copenhagen political criteria like human rights, democracy, etc., to customs union. But now we see both parties do not speak about the other issues rather than what I had mentioned. Therefore, I believe before starting a comprehensive and extensive work on Turkish-Greek problems, we should first decide future of Turkish-EU relations. And the main body of Turkish-EU relations is the Council of Ministers, is not gathered for 4 years. It's supposed to be gathered every year, at least once, at the level of foreign ministers. So I think it's a better idea for Turkey and the EU to come together first and decide whether this negotiation process will continue or not, because it is not officially frozen. It is not officially suspended. It is unofficially suspended because since 2015, no single chapter was opened. So we should decide. If it is officially suspended, then there should be a council decision. If this membership issue is finished, then the EU should say to Turkey, okay, we can create other means of cooperation, like privileged partnership, like good neighborhood relations. But waiting for more than 50 years in front of the door really made EU as an issue very having a very low agenda item in Turkish foreign policy agenda. If you check with Turkish public discourse about the foreign policy, unfortunately, individually, I mean unfortunately, the EU is not among top 5 issues. Turkey is much more
like the economy?
No, in foreign policy issues, I mean. Of course, economy is number one. Everywhere, economy is in US, in Russia, everywhere.
Foreign policy, it's not the EU membership bid.
So EU membership issue is not among number 5 agenda items according to Turkish public. Number 1 is war in Ukraine, of course. Situation in Syria, situation in Karabakh, Eastern Mediterranean, and our relations with African countries. We don't care about what is going on in Europe. We are very much busy in Africa. And I mean it. And we have other jobs, other parts of the world. We don't need to wait for more 5 decades in front of the doors of Europe. And these are, when we come together with academics, we who are working on EU issues, I believe that Turkish-Greek relations cannot be extracted from Turkish-EU relations anymore. It became a part of Turkish-EU relations. So if we want to go forward in Turkish-Greek relations, first we have to decide about the future of Turkish-EU relations. And it is instant. And we cannot postpone it anymore. Otherwise, in Turkish public opinion, we will lose the support for EU membership forever.
Well, that's crystal clear. So, Professor Lacras, in your opinion, you may comment to everything that has been said so far, but in your opinion, which is the greatest obstacle to overcome in the efforts to improve bilateral relations?
Yes, first of all, this is the EU motive is missing. So if we turn the clock back to 2004 and see that the whole process was not completed because the new government, the new democracy government that came to power after 2004 elections did not follow what has achieved in Helsinki in 1999. And then, of course, the red light became green without examining whether Turkey has already completed the obligations towards the member states, in particular Greece, to go on and settle the outstanding disputes. Then there is no motive, especially after 2008, when the European Union, not all of the countries, but the major countries of the European Union, like Germany, Great Britain, Denmark, the Netherlands, maybe more, turned their back to Turkey, saying that you're not going to become a member of the European Union. That was the end of it. And I remember that in 2008, really, Erdogan turned the, let's say, turned the button and say, I don't have anything else to do. I don't have any motive to continue the exploratory talks. And then Erdogan started and gave the directive to the people who were the interlocutors of the exploratory talks to say that we have first to discuss about gray zones, to discuss about demilitarization. If you start with gray zones, and demilitarization means that you will never go to the crucial point, which is the delimitation of the continental shelf. So it was becoming so hard. And you can also see that in the course of the years, Turkey always, the first thing that they put in front in order to make it harder for them to discuss about the limitation of continental shelf, always refer, I mean the official Turks, always refer to demilitarization and to the gray zones, and of course enhancing all these theories nowadays by connecting the demilitarization, and because demilitarization is not observed, which is a conventional obligation of Greece. So because it is not observed, then there is, of course, a case to contest the sovereignty of the islands, which have to be demilitarized. All of this become or come because of the objection of the EU to Turkey. Even now, I don't think that the main EU member states are in favor of Turkey's continuing the examination of the different chapters. And all of this wait for Greece and Cyprus to say whether they have problem with Turkey to enter the European Union. But Greece and Cyprus are very small states and cannot be the sole controlling as powers in the EU to turn around the game and to turn around the narrative and say, yes, of course, it is now time. Even because Greece always thinks about setting up a customs union upgrading and the freeing of visa. But it is not up to Greece. It is up to the major players in the EU to decide upon this. But Greece, of course, and Cyprus have to be very friendly and very much in favor of Turkey's connection and of course, good relations with EU. Because, first of all, we are neighbors. Second, anytime, in our opinion, in our narrative, anytime Turkey is at an impasse, then, of course, the first to be affected by this is either Greece or Cyprus. So in this case, of course, it is good for Greece to have a very good stance towards Turkey, and this is what happens. Nowadays, I think is a very good time, is a very good momentum. This is the momentum to continue. I suppose, and I think that this is a unique time to go on and, of course, settle as much as we can, starting from the building, the confidence building measures, which is very difficult because it is matters that come from military. The positive agenda, which is the easier, I think, and we can do very many things, and of course the political dialogue. If in the political dialogue there is something that can be, let's say, very heavily on the table concerning the militarization of gray zones, then of course the political dialogue is not going to move ahead. But if there is political will on the part of Erdogan, because Erdogan is the great player in this case, if Erdogan gives the signal and say, okay, let's go and finish up with delimitation of continental shelf, and if I understand correctly what I heard so many times in the exploratory talks of Turkish officials saying, which were around the table, saying that if we settle the continental shelf, back on those days, did not discuss about the exclusive economic zone. But if we settle the continental shelf, everything else is going to be secondary.
I would like to ask a comment from Professor Aslan on this point of view. And we heard Professor Liakouras setting priorities and the Erdogan's role in the process. We also have a comment, and I would like to read from Kavala. They're watching us, and they're mentioning the diplomacy of citizens, because tourism is another area where the two countries can collaborate effectively, apart from education and trade and investments. So diplomacy of citizens, as Alexander from Kavala says, it's really invaluable in the process to bring the two countries together. So Murat, I would like a comment for what Professor Liakouras said on Erdogan's role and on the priorities that are set.
Thank you. First of all, I'm not pessimistic, even though it's too early to be an optimist. I'm not pessimistic because there is a fact, if any country escalates in terms of security, or if Greece or Turkey is exposed to any natural disaster, or there happens an economic crisis, well, the other will also suffer because we are that much intertwined to each other. Just remember the economic crisis in Greece. I mean, there were a lot of Greek cars coming to Istanbul to find a job and think that that was normal. In this sense, I think if something happens in a negative connotation, through a negative connotation, let me say, both will lose and spare time. Another issue that must be brought to the attention of the publics and policymakers, well, once there happens something negative, if there is any escalation like we have experienced in 2019-20, the third parties always exploit it, either through selling some arms, weapons, or building up base like the US bases in Greece right now. There were, I believe, 9 bases. Well, it may be a guarantee for the security of Greece in the perception of Greek public, though. There is a rule. I'm a former soldier. Once a soldier has a step, has a foot on somewhere, it's really hard to have this soldier be out of the country. So that's really important. Another issue, the relations of both countries, as I said before, should not be an asset of internal politics. Once you try to suffer a word, well, it may be a point of reaction in the minds of radicals, nationalists, etc. On the other hand, we must have a long-term agenda and long-term sight on how to develop the relations. If the relations are entrapped to the political expectations of either parties or leaderships, well, we will always stop period to the elections, and sometimes escalation will be a point of instrumentalizing the environment. So internal politics should be excluded in the case of Turkish-Greek relations. And education curricula, it's important. Radicalization is a danger. Radicalization is not a term that should be used with Islam. Radicalization is also ultra-nationalism, Nazism, racism, etc. Ultra-left or ultra-right, doesn't matter. And in the case of Turkish-Greek relations, unfortunately, there's a great radicalization among the groups. Let's check, for instance, as Professor Petros delineated, we are unable to solve some issues, like the gray zones, politically. Well, military should not be an option. Why? Once you start it, now we are in a world that unconventionality, conventionality, symmetric and asymmetric, regular and irregular, all are mixed. That complicates the struggle. In this sense, the gray zones must be managed with a sustainable formula. Otherwise, once you start military option, it's not easy to step back from the engagement, as we have witnessed during the Ukraine and Russia war right now. And I would like to, just delineate shortly some basic things. First of all, if both countries sit and agree on something or disagree on something, there must be left no ambiguity. And that's the problem. If there exists an ambiguity in understanding each other, that means you are surpassing the frame, and it's one thing. Second thing, there must be flexibility, though. There must be no flexibility in terms of breaching the rules of engagement, which leans on stability. Well, criticizing is good, especially in the newspapers. It's a freedom of expression. But I think, having the words be selected is really important, especially in the mouths of politicians. And one final thing, this EU issue. Now, there's a problem, in my opinion, especially of the Greek politicians. Sorry, but I have to tell this. Once there happens a sort of escalation or resonation, the referent point is always EU. Well, if Turkey feels that Turkey will not be a member of the EU community, well, Turkey does have options, may stand alone. The current policy of being a strategically autonomous actor, well, it may be something alien for the Moscow. Well, it's an option, viable option. I believe that the relations of both countries should not rely on the intentions and visions of the third parties, because they will exploit it, as I said before. And EU, well, it's a ground, but EU is the actor losing its ground. And believe in me, it's a projection on me. You may agree or disagree. Currently, there is a great objection on the Turkish membership to the EU. But please, if you project the potential crisis in 30 or 40 years, it's the countries like Turkey that can provide safety to Europe because of the young population, because of the expanding economy, and because of the geopolitics. So rather than pushing away, I believe that EU must review the policy and search for how to include Turkey to the equilibriums in the European ground. Otherwise, they will lose a lot. One of my Romanian colleagues told me that once Ukraine is accepted to EU as a member, they have to accept Turkey as well. I don't know. I mean, this is just her remark, but I don't know. But EU must review exactly what they are doing regarding Turkey. Once they lose it, they can't have it anymore.
I don't know if Professor Philis or Professor Liakras want to comment on that. A very short comment, because we have to conclude our discussion.
Two very short comments to my friend and my colleague Murat's remarks. Number one, I think that Turkey has to review its policy and its approach vis-a-vis the EU as well, and vis-a-vis its neighborhood, as it is doing actually right now. Turkey decided to, for its own reasons, to let me say, I'm trying to put it elegantly, to break up its ties with Israel and Egypt for over a decade, and to follow an assertive policy vis-a-vis Greece and Cyprus. Whether that was a result of its sense of being isolated from other Eastern Mediterranean countries, or whether it was self-isolated, which is my view, does not matter for now. But what has happened is that since 2009, with the Mavi Marmara incident, and then with the events in Egypt, Turkey was marginalized from Eastern Mediterranean developments, which of course was detrimental for Turkey, but it brought instability to the region, because Turkey is too big to be ignored on the one hand, but it has to accept some common set of rules that other sides, other neighbors, other players in the region seem to have agreed upon. So this is my first comment, and I can see, and I'm very glad that Turkey is restoring its ties with Israel. Turkey is restoring its ties with Egypt. There are, of course, difficulties in both cases, especially with Egypt, but that is a positive development, because we do not want to set a cordon sanitaire in the Eastern Mediterranean against Turkey. On the contrary, we want Turkey to play a constructive role in regional affairs, but a constructive role through some commonly accepted rules of the game. This is my first comment. And my second comment is that, yes, Turkey is growing. Turkey's demographics are admirable, I would like to note. However, still its economy, and that was something that President Erdogan and the rest of the political elite realized, is very much dependent on Western capital, is very much centered or orientated towards the West. And yes, there has been support by Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Azerbaijan, Russia, given that Turkey is not part of the sanctions that the West has imposed on Russia. But at the same time, more than 70% of FDI, and Turkey is looking for FDI, I mean foreign direct investment, comes from European capital. So there is an interconnection between the economies, an obvious interconnection, and we have to bear that in mind as well.
Okay, I want to thank you all for addressing such an interesting and important topic. Professor Philis, Professor Erhan, Professor Liakouras, Professor Aslan. Well, the aim was to build a constructive dialogue, which will pave the way for reaching solutions in the most important issues between Greece and Turkey. Let's hope bilateral relations will improve in the immediate future. Thank you all for watching.